Welcome to HR.com Live. This podcast is produced by HR.com, the #1 destination to help 1.7 million HR executives maximize human potential and drive extraordinary business results.
Good afternoon. Welcome to HR.com Live. My name is Dr. Heidi Scott, and I'm the Chief Learning Officer at HR.com, where my goal is to ensure that our learning ecosystem remains innovative so we effectively equip HR professionals with the tools they need to learn, lead, and navigate their careers. I'll be your host for today, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about the role of remote employees with Dr. Deborah Smith Cook. She's the owner and president of Atheseus. It's a coaching and consulting company that delivers coaching for team performance, strategy and consulting, and change management. She has over 25 years of experience in strategy consulting and talent development strategy. Deborah has earned a doctoral degree from Indiana University in strategic management and organizational behavior. She also holds positions in the public and private sector for Securities and Exchange Commission, the Department of Defense, Caliber Learning Network, as well as, she's a busy lady, she teaches doctoral, master's, and undergrad courses at George Washington University, Texas A&M, and Indiana University. And now back to our discussion about the role of remote employees. So Deborah, thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you, Heidi. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
I am too, because this is like near and dear to my heart, because the team I lead is all remote all over the world. So I'm excited to learn some new strategies from you. So as we get going, what are some of the most startling current facts and stats around remote employees?
You know, Heidi, I think I got interested in this because I was also a remote worker, and then I was the team lead for remote work. And that really sparked my interest in this trend, which is just growing phenomenally. I think it's a trend that the University of Virginia, in some research last week, just called the demographic trend of the decade. So 50% of our workforce will be working remote by the year 2020, which is this year. And so it's been growing at a rapid rate. About 4.7 million people in the US work in some form of remote work. It could be full-time, it could be part-time. And some people even suggest that the office, as we know it, will be obsolete by the year 2030. Now,
Wow.
I'm not sure we're going to get there, but that seems to be an interesting idea.
Well, you're right. It certainly, it won't serve as like, what in the world are you talking about? It's much like today when people ask, now, where do you work? Oh, I work remotely. People don't bat an eye because they know, oh, we know what that means and know what that entails. So as HR professionals, when we think about the new HR leader being equipped for today and tomorrow, what are some things you think that we need to be embracing to really maximize the benefits of remote teams, as well as minimize some negatives?
So, you know, one of the things that we've found out is about knowledge workers, about 95% of them want to work remote, and 74% of them would actually leave a job to go to a place that offered them remote benefits. So as HR professionals, that's clearly something that we need to understand and address in terms of benefits that we offer and turnover, and how do we prevent turnover. So, you know, it's a big movement that as HR professionals we need to think about and to think intentionally about it. I think that's one of the things that I've noticed as I've worked with some firms is that we don't often sort of put that hat on of remote friendly or remote first to think about what those implications are. I was talking to a firm the other day, and they've just changed their vacation policy. So instead of offering X number of weeks plus X number of national holidays, because they had employees all over the world, they decided they would just do 40 days of vacation across the board. And, you know, it worked out. You know, people in Great Britain had 5 weeks of vacation and 7 national holidays. So that was a total of like 32. People in Canada had 5 weeks of vacation and 11 national holidays. So that was like 36. So by creating one simple policy, they made it equitable across the entire company and made it so much simpler for HR to administer as well.
So Deborah, I manage a fully remote team, and through some hard knocks, I've figured out some best practices to do that well. But I would love to learn from you. What are some strategies you have for the leader out there who has a fully remote team?
It's interesting because we are playing without a rule book or a playbook. So we are making up a lot of the things as we go. What I've seen with some of the fully remote teams that works well is that they establish hot hours so that between the hours of 10 and 2, everybody is available. So whatever time zone that
Across
is,
time zones?
across time zones. So that just makes it easier for people to connect during those time periods. So they do put some structure. I think that's one of the myths about remote work is not just free for all. There actually is, there must be times when we all are together. Some of the other things that they do is that they recognize that asynchronous communication is really valuable and we can accomplish a lot with asynchronous, and documenting things and making all of those documents available to everybody across the team is really essential. But the fully remote teams also acknowledge that we have to do some synchronous meeting. Some of that can be through Zoom video calls. Sometimes what they'll do, especially when you're doing onboarding or culture building or team building, they will have a retreat or a meeting, but they'll schedule those meetings in different locations around the world, wherever their employees are. So it's not that everybody's coming to one corporate location. They might have a meeting in Europe for all the employees, that everyone would come to Europe for that meeting, or they might have one in India and everybody would come to that meeting. So they're kind of putting everybody on a level playing field and making sure that people have an opportunity to get to know each other in different ways.
No, that's great. I think, for the remote team, yeah, I would still say there's no substitute for the value of face-to-face interaction. It just
Mhm.
may be short-lived, which makes it all the more valuable. So I
Exactly.
think managing a remote team, a fully remote team, is many times perhaps easier than that hybrid team where you have some of your employees that you meet with face to face, you work in an office, and you have some who are remote. So I know there's probably a number of folks watching and or listening to this video cast that are in that boat, perhaps. So what are some strategies that you have for us as HR professionals, the leading today and leading tomorrow, being equipped for this hybrid situation?
So one of the things that I found is to have a remote first mindset, so that even if you have people in the office, you treat the meetings as if everybody is remote. So you might even have people dial in from their desks rather than going to a conference room, because I can imagine there are a lot of people out there that have had the same experience that I have, which is you're on the phone on a remote uh, with a remote team that and has part of the team in the office, and you get to the end of the meeting and the leader says, hey, anybody out there on the phone have something to contribute? Well, that is absolutely not the time you want to raise your hand. so so a lot of times the people that are remote in these hybrid teams feel left out. They don't feel like their voices are heard. And so as an HR professional, as a team lead, we need to be very conscious about how do we draw them in? How do we make sure we give them an opportunity? And part of that is using some of the technology tools that we have available, like Slack or Twist, which allows us to have conversations that are not in a meeting session. Um, so that's one of the things that I would recommend, is to make sure that we think consciously about those people that are out there, and how do we make sure that we bring them in. Um, that's a big mindset issue, that I think our leaders need to have some time developing.
Yeah, and I think you're right on the money with that, and it brings to mind the concept of equity. When you think of equity of your voice, equity of the ear of your manager, of your leader, if you're not physically shoulder to shoulder like other folks on your team may be,
Mhm.
if that's a dilemma, then we as leaders need to remove that hurdle from folks and really create that equitable communication space. So what are some final strategies that you may have just in all of this? I mean, this has been awesome. So what other tidbits can you share with us?
Well, I think when we look at the various activities as a HR professional, we really need to look broadly across those, like you were saying, with the benefits, and trying to find something that's equitable. So some firms are subsidizing the development of a home office, and one of the dysfunctional consequences of remote work that we've seen is this big loneliness epidemic, that many remote workers, even though that's what they want, they still feel isolated and alone. And so firms, recognizing that, are now saying, we'll either set you up in a home office or we'll pay for you to go to a co-working space. So then you get kind of the best of both worlds. You get to be, working remotely, but you have an office with support around you. So I think, thinking not just about, okay, well, what does a remote worker need, but what does that worker need is really critical for HR. I think in terms of the, talent acquisition, that's another big issue that comes into play when we talk about remote workers, because, we now have a talent pool that's worldwide. We can draw on anybody. And so that gives us greater opportunity to find just those people that want to do the work. And, maybe we find even more talented people that, don't want to move to San Francisco because the cost of living is too high, but they live in a wonderful place in Idaho. And, you could get this great person who wants to stay in Idaho. So, we've got there are so many benefits to this notion of remote work. And the way that we recruit people, one of the organizations that I was associated with before has very successfully used virtual job fairs. So we don't have to go to a place, a hotel where everybody gets together. So, I think it's just about, having the right mindset and being very intentional about how we design these programs.
I love everything you're saying, and it's so apt for any HR professional, really at any level. I mean, whether we are part of a team, we can still influence a virtual team or virtual team members. So thank you for these gems. So one of the things I love to know is what should I have on my bookshelf? You have a lot of books behind you. Clearly you're a informed gal, but honestly, what are you reading that you think that we may all want to have on our bookshelf and be aware of?
Oh gosh, that's like asking me to name my favorite child. So I have a couple that I'm reading right now, or rereading. I'm actually rereading this one by Michael Stallard, called Connection Culture. And, the need for connection is so critical to the way that we work. And in remote teams, it's a bit more of a challenge. So we have to think about, how do we consciously do that? I also am reading Quiet by Susan Cain, about introverts. And if you can imagine that a third to a half of our population are introverts, if you put those introverts on a remote team, you've got to make sure that you're including them in the discussion. And then I have several others that I'm reading as well. But those are two that right now I find to be informing me about how to work with these remote teams.
Thank you. I mean, I think that's like I said, I'm kind of a learning junkie, so that's right up my alley of knowing what's out there and of interest that'll help me become more educated, but also be educated so I can do my job better, which is what HR.com's L&D team is all about.
Yes.
They help HR professionals. So thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. And thanks for watching, whether this is live or an archived web video cast. Don't forget to check out our archived episodes on HR.com. We release new episodes every day to keep you up to date on all things HR. Have a great day. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to HR.com Live. We have new episodes daily to help you maximize your potential. Be sure to check out our archives on HR.com and share it with your friends. Cheers.